Wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for being here. This event will be recorded and it will be available to those of you who have tickets for 2 weeks. And then after that, it will be housed on the APLD-CA.org advocacy page for free. Also note that you can look at the full bios on the Eventbrite page if you have more questions, because we have a lot of wonderful faces and a lot of expertise here tonight. We just want to remind you to follow APLD Sacramento and APLD California on Eventbrite for more amazing programs like this. We want to say that none of this would be possible without our videographer, Eli Wilbur. We have giant heaps of gratitude going out to our video editors. That would be Eli Radusava and my friend David Tribble. All right, so how's it going to work today? First, we'll show you the clips of the video shorts, and then we'll check with our experts. We have experts that are related to the videos, and some of them may have comments and things to say. We have other experts that might want to weigh in, and we want to then hear your questions. You should enter those questions into the chat, all right? Not the Q&A. Enter questions into the chat, please. Marcia will be monitoring those questions to make sure that everybody's gets answered. And also in the chat, watch for related links that are going to be posted in there, okay? We do promise a bio break midway. And let's get into our sponsors. I want to introduce who's here with us today, and you can flip your camera on real quick and give us a wave if you like to. First up from Sacramento Regional County Sanitation District, we have Brian Young, who's going to be with us on video and on camera. Hi, Brian. And we also have Nicole Coleman, possibly watching Public Affairs. And she helped us work through a lot of pandemic uncertainties that came along with this project. So thank you so much, Nicole. From the city of Sacramento, we have William Granger, Department of Utilities, Water Conservation. Hi, William, thank you. Special thanks goes out to Jessica McCabe of Stormwater Quality Improvement Program for her assistance. Fabulous. And last but not least, of course, that's us, the Association of Landscape Designers, Professional Landscape Designers, California chapter, APLD-CA.org, where my fearless Sacramento collaborators do amazing work advocating for design education and our environment. You already met Cheryl and Martine, my fellow collaborators on this project, as well as Marcia Scott. So that's us. That's what we're up to. So a little bit more about Show the Flow and the background of the program. Quickly, we are here today to tell the story of water in the landscape. Water being mostly practical, a little bit poetic, as you will see in some of the designs, and 100% necessary. We offer up some possibilities with these videos, and we suggest why you should most carefully consider this element of water. After today, we ask that you use these videos, that you share them to get a conversation rolling along about how every person, every family, every business and institution is connected to water. And what we do with water in our daily lives makes such a big difference in our communities and our environment. What you will see today is a series of video shorts that are linked together by a network of water users, field experts, and creators. And maybe most importantly, the land that is the Sacramento River watershed, supporting us all. The storytelling begins with 2 residential gardens and then goes on to 3 larger scale sites in the same region, all related by our local creeks and rivers, because water by its very nature connects. So we're just reminding you quickly to use the chat for your questions. We'll watch the clip first, we'll listen for our experts, and then we will ask questions, and we'll have a bio break about halfway through. Cheryl, let's get started.
We're proud members of the Association of Professional Landscape Designers, the California chapter. I'm Cheryl Buckwalter, the chapter's Advocacy Chair, and today I'm joined by
Soleil Tranquilli, Sacramento District.
And
Martin Carrion van Rijn, APLD California Chapter President.
At APLD, we advocate for many things. We advocate for our right to practice as professional landscape designers. We advocate for our environment, such as the Healthy Pots, Healthy Planet initiative. We advocate for diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we also advocate for education of our members, our clients, and others. The Show the Flow tour includes residential and non-residential landscapes that demonstrate the watershed approach to landscape design, which is based on 4 practical principles. Build and protect healthy, living soil. Use supplemental irrigation efficiently when it is needed. Select and use local California natives and climate-appropriate plants. Collect and reuse rainwater. And that's exactly what the Show the Flow video tour is going to demonstrate and what our experts will be speaking about. So join us.
Thank you, Cheryl. All right. So first off, we're going to start with a pair of residential front yard gardens. And I'm going to introduce our panel for this pair of gardens. First up will be Stephen Zine, retired of Living Resources Company, IPM innovator and advocate, soil scientist guru. We have Marcia Scott of APLD. She's an arborist and designer. Martin Carrion, who is contractor and designer. Myself, landscape designer. And I'm going to introduce our garden host, Pat McKinnon, who you will see in her own lovely garden in number 2 video, all right? And one little fact, residence number 1 drains into Elk Grove Creek, which is part of the Laguna Creek watershed. So let's get going with that.
Hi, I'm Soleil Tranquilli. Join us on this residential landscape tour where we show how every garden drains the rains. We'll be going through and showing you how your garden and your landscape is really a mini watershed. Join us.
Good morning, my name is Martin Carrion. On this site, what I wanted to point it out is, I'm going to talk about irrigation and basically the connection with storm water management, because on this site in particular, a lot has been done to manage the rain that comes from the storms and actually to infiltrate the water into the soil. You can see that a lot with the hardscapes and with the rain gardens and with the plants and everything. When you infiltrate water from the storms into the soil, it actually reduces the amount of water that you need to supplement throughout the year. That sponge basically absorbs more water and stores more water and keeps it there for longer. Therefore, it also reduces the amount of supplemental water that we need to add.
So we're going to show you how this garden is actually a mini watershed, and we're going to start at the top of the watershed, which is our hard surfaces. It's always the roof or the mountain of the watershed, hard, impermeable surfaces. We're grabbing the water as it comes off the hard surface, and then we're going to slow it and store it right here in these rain barrels. Another way to capture that water off your hard surface, off your mountaintop, if you will, is to grab that water and slow it in a beautiful rain chain. Now, as we go further, if that water falls out of the sky, it's going to fall on a permeable space, which is these natural bluestone spaces with sharp rock or sharp gravel in between. Note how the water sinks very quickly into the soil. That's going directly into soil. Now to take our permeable surfaces, we have water flowing underneath our feet, and the water's flowing off the soil to our rain garden, which is right here. It's a nice bioswale right in the middle of the garden. I'm standing in a 6-inch rain garden. That's all it is just a little slot in the middle of my garden that's grabbing all the water off my roof and channeling into here. This garden is planted with sedges and juncus and other native plants that literally will hold that water with their roots in the soil. It is literally the coolest, sweetest spot on the property in the summer.
The environment under trees is a totally different environment than the environment out in full sun. So when we hydrozone as landscape designers, what that means is we are choosing plants that need the same water culture as the other plants. So for instance, a low water native plant is going to need once a week or every 10 days. That's really different from another plant over here that might need water twice a week. So the plants that need water twice a week are on one hydrozone, and the plants that need water only once every 10 days are on a whole different hydrozone. And actually, there are plants that only need water twice a month or once a month in the summer in the Sacramento Valley. And a lot of times those are trees.
So one of the things we did here is replaced our concrete driveway. We left some slots or grooves to add some permeable pavers so that if we were to wash our car or rain were to fall out of the sky, none of that water will hit the storm drains. It will be directed to the sides and into the landscape. So this is our laundry to landscape system. Basically, we have a very old wash machine, 40 to 60 gallons of water every time we wash. So on cold water wash, we can set our water, put our lever to landscape, and have all of this water go out into our landscape. When the wash machine pumps the water out of the machine, it's coming out into the landscape instead of hitting the sewer, and it's going to go right into these basins. So the best part about the laundry to landscape system in our garden is that all of our water, our cold water washes, goes into this system all along the fence and grows shade and citrus trees.
All right, micro watershed number 2 is the home of Pat McKinnon, and that residence drains into the Sacramento River. Let's watch.
Hi, I'm Pat McKinnon, the owner of this property. I was a junior in high school when my parents bought this home in 1962. And then after my parents passed away, my husband and I bought the house. We had previously lived in Oakland, and it had a very large Bermuda grass lawn in the front. And here we had to worry about watering, and everybody wants green lawns. And we knew with the climate in California going to reduced water usage, we needed to redo our landscaping.
And this yard has all kinds of really interesting plants in it. It's got plants that are hummingbird attractive or butterfly attractive and are bee attractive, as well as all kinds of other pollinators like beetles and different birds. The thing to remember about all these plants, it was very important to the designer to hydrozone everything. So most of these plants take the same type of water. This entire yard takes the same type of water. Also, there's 3 to 4 inches of mulch around all the plants and above the drip system here. So that acts as an insulating blanket and conserves moisture in the soil.
Here's a garden that needed an update to match the residential construction updates. So now what we've done is we've gone in and we've added a rainwater capture, several features actually for rainwater capture, and I'm going to show you what those look like. Here are the ways that we're keeping water on site. First up, we have contoured the driveway to be graded so that it drains into the landscape on each side. We have quartzite stepstones spaced for permeability. We have, for rainwater catchment and storing, we have a gigantic Bushman cistern. We've added 2 rain gardens, one on each side of the front walkway, as contours across the slope so it can capture and slow that rainwater down and store it in the plant roots of the soil. We have added rain chains from the downspouts that also exposes the flow of the water. And
now that we're on the subject of watershed, what does a healthy watershed, how does it come to be? There are 4 principles that we use. Build a healthy living soil, capture storm water, use California native plants or climate appropriate plants, and use efficient irrigation. Irrigation has a very close connection to the soil. In this particular property, for example, there was a grid system. We were talking about how to create a healthy watershed and how to create a healthy living soil. One of the most important aspects is that the soil needs to have a balanced, the right amount of water for there to be soil biology. The soil biology is the one that really helps to create that sponge. So we have here a very good example that a grid system is a really great way to implement this principle, because the grid system helps you manage the water, apply it properly. With this system, we're connecting the type of soil, which is a loamy sand, with the type of irrigation, because we need to make sure that we apply the amount of water that the irrigation system is putting in, is the soil is able to absorb it. We don't want to have too much or too little. So this system really works perfectly. So that will prevent runoff of water and will ensure that all the water stays in the soil and creates this environment that will promote the biology in the soil and will also promote healthy growth of plants.
All right, everybody. Let's have comments from our experts, Pat McKinnon and Stephen Zine, Marcia and Martine.
So I just want to comment that when I watch these videos, I realize that when I mention water and hydrozones, I didn't mention that each hydrozone has to have its own separate valve or valves in an irrigation system.
Good point. Yes. Yes, it is hard to get into the nitty gritty on some of these videos. We try to keep it simple and succinct. But yeah, that's the truth of the matter. Breaking it up, keeping it simple and clean. All right, I saw that there were some questions, but
yeah, I'm ready to ask some if you'd like, Souley.
Sure.
So there's one in the first garden where those permeable paver stones, were they purchased? And if so, who sells them?
Mm-hmm.
And the ones in the driveway too.
Right. The ones in the driveway were called ZeraPave, and they were, I don't know if the company is still in operation. They were purchased, and they're a very cool idea. They're just held together by stone pebbles held together by epoxy. Great idea. Did not install very easily because when they were cut, they weren't cut square. So all of them had to be recut. My poor contractor had quite the headache. But you could probably do the same with a permeable paver that was permeable with spaces along the side and do something beautiful with that. The other stones that I think were being talked about are just a tumbled bluestone slate. That's all they were. And those were bought locally here in Sacramento.
And there is permeable concrete that can be installed if it's not just the little squares. And there's a follow-up question to that. Can you describe the construction of this driveway strip? How deep did you go down, and how was the base prepared for the pavers? Andrea, thanks you.
Oh, good questions, you guys. Yeah, so when we are doing that, it's literally just the concrete is just poured with a big wide swath and the grade is much lower. So we have space to, in that slot or that swath, we're going to put those permeable pavers in there. It was way over engineered. There's some drain rock, and I think there's a drain pipe in there that leads to the sides. So the water goes off to the sides and into the garden soil. Way overbuilt. But we're ready for any kind of water that falls on that driveway to not hit the storm, to not hit the gutter. So
It sounds thoroughly functional, and it's meeting the demand and the need of keeping that rainwater on site. And then there's another question, and then I have a couple for Pat also for our second residential landscape. The gray water, other than fruit trees, what ornamental plants would you recommend for gray water use?
oh, I think, oh, that's for me. I'm sorry. Yeah, so anything but a root crop. And note that that whole, you couldn't see it, but the whole side of the residence there is watered with the gray water all along the fence from front to back. And I wanted to do low water shade trees, and I realized that I have way too much water coming out of my wash machine. So I thought, well, this is a great way to work in some citrus and some edibles. So we planted shade trees that are citrus trees. So that's what we did. Does that answer the question?
Great, thank you. And by the way, those blue barrels that you have, before I ask Pat, the blue rain barrels, how much water do those, how much water do your blue rain barrels hold? How do you use that water? How long does it sit there?
That's a good question. Well, it doesn't hold enough, I'll tell you that. It's that's more of a demonstration. Just to, I liked the color of the plastic, and I thought, oh, let's just pop these in there to show people what it looks like. It's under 100 gallons, and it fills up immediately, you guys. Definitely. So I use it usually about this time of year before the storms happen. I just open up that valve and I water my, I water one section of my garden that has my native redbuds in it and bulbs. That's how I use it. So I just empty it out and get ready for the next storm system.
Oh, great. Great. I know, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And I see that there is someone asking for some links for options about permeable pavers, and you're in for a treat because we do have a resource, some research that Lauren Oakey did with colleagues, and it shows these types of landscapes throughout the state. So, and a lot of different resources there. I'd like to pivot for a minute and ask Pat about your Bushman cistern, that rainwater tank on the side of your house, Pat. How much water does that hold, and how do you plan on using that? Have we got Pat?
Can you unmute, Pat? Yeah, there you go.
There you go. Thank you.
That particular water tank holds 530 gallons. That's the largest of the three. They have three different sizes. That particular one is what they call the slim line. They have a couple of different shapes and sizes. My landscape contractor said I really wouldn't want to use it in my front yard because obviously it's on the grid system and everything's irrigated with the under the mulch grid system. So I am attaching a hose to the spigot at the bottom of the water tank and running it alongside my house. That particular side of the house is just for storage and garden supplies. And I do grow Cymbidium orchids, and also I have other potted plants. So I'm going to use the water for the potted plants.
Great.
I think that's a great use.
That is a great use.
Extra water. Yeah.
Yeah. Steve, I have a question for you. What is one single thing that regular people, I guess that means regular everyday people, can do in our gardens to best support soil health and water sequestration?
Well, it's more than just one thing, but the most important, I think, would be to put compost, mulch, and my personal favorite, worm castings. And you want to get that into the soil, but you don't mix it in the soil. You just put it right on top and let Mother Nature incorporate it into the soil. Anytime you work the soil, you're killing those beneficial soil biology. And that soil biology creates soil structure. If you've got a clay soil and it doesn't drain very well, you're going to have problems with all of these pervious pavers and everything we're talking about. You've got to not trying to improve your soil texture, which is in this case the clay soil. You want to improve the soil's structure. And you've got to realize that there are bacteria that glue the sand, silt, and clay particles together. There are fungi and fungals that tie the sand, silt, and clay particles together to create aggregates. And these aggregates then create a diversity of pore spaces that allow the water to move into the soil and through the soil. And so you need to do everything you can to make the environment favorable to the soil biology. You need to avoid using synthetic fertilizers and pesticides, and use only organic fertilizers, and keep an organic material on the soil surface as a mulch.
Great, great, Steve. That's very helpful. Speaking of mulch, what kind of mulch was used? And I think the same kind of mulch was used at both landscapes. Soleil or Pat, do you want to speak about that?
Well, Soleil was the one who recommended it because she was my landscape designer, and it's ground up walnut shells. And so all of my neighbors, when they asked me about it, they said, what a marvelous way to use walnut shells. The crows loved it too, until they finished finding all the little pieces of walnut meat in the yard.
Oh, interesting. Interesting. Soleil, do you have anything else to add about your experience with walnut shell mulch? Because I know you use it fairly extensively.
Yeah, I learned about it from a friend in Davis who does designs, Bernadette Bollix, and I loved the look. It's a local to Northern California product that we get from, we get it from Mariani's. I guess they burn it for biofuel, so it's a little harder to get, but a few gardens are able to grab that every year. My soil is heavy clay soil in general, and Pat's is very sandy and drainy. So we just are playing with that to see how it works. I don't think there's any studies being done on it, and I'd love to see some. So that would be very interesting to hear more about.
Definitely.
On that.
Great. Marcia, are there other questions that you see in the chat that we should be asking?
All I do see, again, is to mention that someone asked about more resources for permeable pavers, which you alluded to. So,
and I don't know. It also depends on what part of the state you might be in. Because there are some, and you'll see also a resource about the watershed approach to landscape design. It's a guidebook that is featured on the homepage of APLD-CA.org, and you can download it for free. And it speaks a lot to using permeable type materials in our watershed friendly landscapes. If anybody has favorite suppliers that they would like to enter into the chat, what I'll do is I'll open that up for a minute if you'd like to enter some in. The reason we don't have it totally open, everybody in attendance here, is because we have so many people attending. It would be a little bit challenging perhaps to find your questions. So I'm going to let everybody put in whatever links and companies that you might suggest throughout the state relative to permeable pavers and so forth, because we have some of our sponsors. So people want to check into like Baselite. I think Site One carries such materials. And so check out our APLD-CA sponsors as well, because they carry a lot of permeable materials.
Oh,
So-
great.
Go ahead.
Sule, there is somebody in the chat asking if you know about the decomposition rate for walnut shells
I do.
and the timing.
Yeah, so they last a really long time, which I guess is okay since we always put compost directly on top of the soil before we add our mulch, whatever our mulch is. So at my house, they've lasted like 5 or 6 years. They kind of thin out and they will stick together after a while with the soil fungi. I'm saying that right. And they kind of gray a little bit when they're super fresh. Not only does it smell like walnuts and the birds will come in, maybe drive the squirrels batty, but also they're kind of red to the eye if you're a designer. So it's very interesting, but they last a really long time and I love them. What do you think, Pat?
Yeah, I love them too. And a lot of people have really commented. The color is really pretty. It really is. You know, obviously it's not quite as dark as a regular kind of bark type mulch, but it's a smaller particle, you know, as far as the bark. But it just sets it off really well, and everyone who sees it really comments on how nice it looks.
That's a really good point.
I'd like to make a comment. When you have, you know, mulches on the soil surface, whatever that mulch is, you can still put your compost on top of that if it's a fine compost. And what works even easier and it is a better product are the worm castings. And then ideally you want to put that down in fall so that the rains will wash it in, so you don't have to use irrigation.
Yes, I've sprinkled organic fertilizer around my citrus trees and stuff right on top of the mulch, and then just watered it in.
Oh, great ideas. It looks like APLD Bay Area District is planning a pervious products presentation. So you should watch Eventbrite for that. They are very active and they do excellent presentations. So Martine, sorry, Cheryl.
I was just going to say, yeah, Martine has a comment about the laundry to landscape. And then
Yes.
I have just one other thing before we go on to the next.
Oh, cool.
Yes, thank you. There was that question about what kind of plants to put in the laundry to landscape, and I think we need to expand that to the soil texture, because that needs to be matched together. You have to do a little bit of a study of how much water is gonna go there and what type of texture you have, either sandy, loam, or clay, because then if you don't want to have it waterlogged. So you need to know how much water you're going to be putting in and you need to match the soil and how much water is going in and the type of plants. That's really what I wanted to say.
And, you know, also if you don't, most people know this, but gray water should never be suspended into the air, should always keep it in the soil. So you can't grow any kind of food that, you know, where your water gets right onto the food. That's a no-no.
Right.
And,
So tree crops are okay. We're not storing gray water. It goes directly into the soil for the soil biology to work on it. And we're also using a special soap with the cold water wash that comes out of the laundry with that particular type of gray water. So yeah, you can learn more about that.
Yeah, great. And Sule, I was just going to say, I know that Pat McKinnon, that you all took advantage of the city of Sacramento's lawn rebate program, river friendly landscaping lawn rebate program. So I know in the next segment, we'll have William Granger from the city speak to that. Are we ready, or is there anything else you want to say while we transition into the next?
Go for it. All right. So now we're going to scoot right around the corner from Pat's house to 35th Avenue Demonstration Garden. It's the City of Sacramento Department of Utilities. Here you're going to see some cutting edge design ideas that are used in a public site renovation, and it's become a demonstration garden. And the question I ask myself is, how can these things translate for use in a home garden? So get your thinking caps on about that. Our panel includes William Granger, and we're introducing Dave Tenmayo, retired environmental specialist, stormwater quality, County of Sacramento. We have Ben Woodside, landscape architect and principal of Callender and Associates. So get ready for the 35th Avenue demonstration garden, which does pour into the Sacramento River. Drains right into the river.
My name is William Granger. I'm the Water Conservation Coordinator with the City of Sacramento, Department of Utilities, and I run the water conservation programs for the city. The city had a number of objectives with regard to this project. Primarily from a water conservation standpoint, we wanted to have a demonstration garden and really highlight waterwise landscaping, all the variety of waterwise plants that were available to homeowners and businesses to put in place of turf grass.
My name is Ben Woodside. I'm with Callender Associates. We are landscape architects here in the Sacramento area. The city's main goals were to be able to showcase as large of a palette of sustainable design practices as they could put on the site to educate the community on things they can do on their commercial or on their homes, and showcase a lot of new technology. So one of the biggest assets of the site is the existing trees. As you can see, there's a very mature stand of oak trees, a couple of different types of our native oak trees that are here, valley oaks and blue oaks. When we came in, the oak trees were really healthy. So our job was to make sure that we improve the environment around the oak trees to make sure that they can live and have a good, happy, healthy life here. So what we wanted to do is remove the high water use plantings and then pair the oak trees with plant material that would be compatible to their water use. Throughout all the canopy, the oak trees, we did all above grade inline drip irrigation. When we're using mulch materials, the more natural the material is, the better it is for the living systems under the oaks. It's not just the roots, it's all the worms and the creatures that are living underneath there too that help keep replenishing the soil. On this garden, we knew that going in, so we picked native and climate adaptable species that worked well, showed well, but were also easier to maintain. They're ones that we knew were tried and true. Biggest failures that happens on low water use plantings is overwatering. One of the major goals of the water side, or how we irrigate the landscape, that the city wanted to showcase was a water capture and reuse system. There's three major components to it. The first one is the water coming in. And so we repiped from the roof one of the catchments on the edge of the roof. We repiped it, caught the water coming from what used to be the downspout and bring it into the tank. So, and the second component is the tank and how that works. And then the third component is the irrigation system itself. This is about a 9,000 gallon tank. 9,000 gallons will water, in simple terms, about 2 drip stations year round. And we used ultra low water use plantings for this to help make sure that we can maximize the water that's in there, the water use. One of the other big goals on the site was to showcase LID, or low impact development principles when it comes to stormwater. In California, one of the great things that's happened over the more current years, probably the last decade, is paying attention to our stormwater, because everything that we drain onto the hardscapes goes right into the river. We are now, as a whole practice, stopping that stormwater early, making sure we clean it up before it heads off to our natural creeks and rivers. And so this site showcases many great design practices and options and ideas on how to clean the stormwater. The biggest feature is the large bioswale that goes down through the middle of the site. And all of the water off of the roof, all the water off the landscape, and all the water off the parking lots goes through bioswales. And then we planted it with 2 different types of planting design. On the sides is a simple no-mow fescue that works really well, easy to maintain, and last a long time, and it can put up with when it's during the drier point of the year. Down in the middle of it, you'll see the taller stuff. That's a perennial polyculture of a few different grasses and sedges that grows really well in wet environments. At the end of it is then a catch basin that gathers the water, and then it heads off towards the city's stormwater drain system. The educational component of the project is core to what the goals were for the city. The central component of that is the outdoor classroom that we put in right off of the building. The city will be able to bring people in, have some classroom time, and have some actual field time right here, educating the public on how to lower water use. Right here along the edge of the parking lot is a smaller green swale heading to what's called a sand filter. And the way this functions is the swale is fairly flat, and it slows the water down, and it allows the roots of the plant material to help remove carbons out of the water, and also some of the heavier sediments will be deposited here before it goes to that area. That area is the sand filter, and the idea behind the sand filter is it's a couple substrates of sand and material and filter fabric that will then filter the water all the way down till it gets to the bottom, and then at the bottom of it is a pipe that takes then the full clean water and heads off to the Sacramento River. We propose to do the additional parking on this zone because it did fit really nicely. It was already along an existing walkway, and then work with them to showcase some permeable pavement technologies that would work. And so in this case, we're using a unit paver. And so the way permeable pavement works is, and it has large gaps in between the pavers with smaller rocks that allow water to go down through and then permeate to the subgrade. On this landscape, we wanted to do better than just what the state's minimum was. We probably cut the total water usage on this site down to 1/3 of what it was before we began. So it's great to be able to provide such beautiful landscapes, but that uses and so little water and helps conserve our natural resources here. The biggest lesson that I've learned is I think that as landscape architects and as landscape designers, our job is to serve people. Is the more we can serve people in the environment, the better that the project is.
Well, Ben, I just had a moment.
It just started up again. Give me a moment.
Okay, sorry.
It doesn't want to go away.
Oh, goodness. Ben, I just had a moment of understanding after spending hours on the site. Oh, the sand filter drains the parking lot and the pollutants. I just understood that for a minute there. So that's amazing.
That is so good.
Yeah. All right.
It's one of those aha moments, right?
I just didn't tap into that aspect of it. Anyway, speaking of pollutants, stormwater, storm drains, we have Ben, we have Dave.
Yep.
What do you guys got for us?
Yeah, so let's start with
oh, there's William too. Yeah.
Oh yeah, for William.
All right.
Well, let's talk about, since we're talking about the stormwater. Dave, Dave Tamayo, what's one of your biggest takeaways that you want us to learn from what we're watching today? Pollution, especially, it's so hard to see sometimes. What would you like us to understand about stormwater pollution and some of the main concepts?
Well, the overall main concept is that when water falls onto an urban landscape is that it picks up pollutants, and unless there's efforts to either reduce the amount of pollutants that it contacts or have mechanisms and structures to remove those pollutants, those are going to flow, as you mentioned several times, directly to water bodies like the Sacramento River and to other local creeks and rivers. The key thing about those pollutants is that they cause damage to the environment. They damage ecosystems. They harm creatures that are part of the food chain, and all the way up to fish and the birds and people that eat them. So landscaping that we're talking about here has a great role to play, not only in removing pollutants, but having landscapes that are just inherently healthier and require fewer inputs than some people are used to. So using fewer pesticides or using no pesticides because your plants are healthy, and then also having fewer synthetic or fewer artificial inputs of fertilizers that can also run off and cause problems in water bodies. So
Right.
many services that are provided by correctly designed landscapes, both in new developments and in existing developments that are retrofitted.
Right, right. And I know near and dear to your heart, as well as Steve Zion's, relative to integrated pest management and the importance for our pollinator gardens and health of waterways, not using pesticides. And that's the broad category, which you can speak to. I don't need to tell everybody. Pesticides includes what?
Pesticides are chemicals that are used to control organisms that cause problems in managed areas. So they can include insects, weeds, harmful fungi and plant diseases, just anything that's causing a problem that people want to deal with. And pesticides are a chemical way of attempting to manage those. So.
Yay.
And I will add that pesticides in urban runoff are one of the biggest problems in stormwater. They're consistently found in amounts that are toxic to aquatic organisms, and increasingly they're found in levels that are likely to cause problems for drinking water supplies, particularly when those water supplies are gained from infiltrating large amounts of urban water into the aquifers.
Right.
Now, I'd like to add a comment. We're talking about trying to reduce the use of synthetic pesticides and fertilizers. For about 45 years, I managed an organic landscape maintenance company, and I also managed a retail nursery. And we did it all organically. It can be done. It's all about taking care of that healthy soil. Most people don't realize that there's this bond between the plant roots and the soil biology. They live in a living, assisted living rhizosphere, where the plant roots, up to 40% of the energy of the plant goes into what are called exudates. And these exudates are specific to the plant's needs. If the plant needs phosphorus, it exudes one thing. If the plant is having a problem with a pest, it exudes another chemical. And that triggers and feeds specific soil biology that will then provide them the nutrients that they need or the pest control that they need. And so if you take care of that healthy soil with all of that soil biology, you're really not going to have pest problems. We had very, very few pest problems in our retail nursery. After I got my clients, after a year or two in my organic landscape maintenance service, I think I made, with all of my clients, maybe 2 or 3 pesticide applications using organically acceptable materials. The only things I ever used was horticultural oil and insecticidal soap.
Interesting.
So if you take care of the soil, you're going to have healthy plants that are going to be able to resist pest problems.
Great, great. We have a couple of questions about the design aspects. So get ready, Ben, and then also I have a question for William. But one of them is, what was the biggest challenge, Ben, in designing this low water use demonstration garden?
I think the biggest challenge is whenever you step onto an existing site and trying to rehab what's there, is understanding all those systems and then making sure you address them in the new. So like figuring out down to where the irrigation lines are running and finding out that the city had a big giant water line running right underneath there with an air relief valve that we needed to address. And like putting in the parking and adding parking to an existing parking lot, the existing oaks, as I talked about in the video, just understanding each one of those systems and making sure you address them and protect them as you go forward. You know, it's kind of like treasure hunting. Every time you dig up, you're looking for something new we would find with William out there and then have to address it. So I think that's probably the biggest challenge on the design side on these rehab jobs.
How about taking care of those oaks? I mean, you know, we hear about, oh, let's put the orange, you know, netting around it, and usually it's wrapped around the trunk and not out, you know, it's supposed to be. But, you know, how did you take care of those oaks in that amount of space with all that construction going on?
Yeah, so the first thing we did is by really carefully finding and using all the existing hard landscape irrigation lines that were there that was watering all the turf before, it saved us from having to trench underneath all those trees. So trenching for new irrigation ends up being a lot of what damages the roots around these trees. Secondly, is when we use the net-FM, we did not put it in the grade whenever we're doing net-FM around existing trees, we put it on the grade under the bark, which I know is not the best, but it protects the roots, and usually how we handle that. And then the third thing we did is all the little DG permeable paths and things that we did, we raised them above the existing grade. We did not cut those down in the grade. So we made sure that even the little classroom area of concrete, that was all above existing grade. So we were protecting all those roots on it. And then as mentioned by Steve and others, just making sure we get a good, healthy layer of mulch over it, and keeping paired plants. So the plants underneath the oaks are all compatible with growing under oaks and their water use needs. So it's kind of those are the layers to look at with that.
Thank you. Well, one of the interesting things that I found relative to the design that I think some of our APLD designers will especially find interesting is keeping that sense of place, or that sense of what, you know, holding on to something from the past. So, and you mentioned how you all try to do that with every project, like the water meter lids as a walkway. So would you mind speaking to that for a moment?
Yeah, upcycling. We find things that people would throw away and then we reuse those. So we love finding those things and working with folks like William. Whenever you're working with some municipal like drainage or sewer, they always got really cool relics in their yard. So like if I was in South San Francisco, you find hand cut limestone, or if I'm in Sacramento, you find all these cool manhole covers that nobody wants anymore. And so it's neat to go in there, and William was really nice to work with their crew to let us go in and see what they have, and then incorporate that into the design as stepping stones, like you said, or other things. Or you saw the brick pipe that they're showcasing anyway. So just highlighting some of those features too that are there.
Right. Very good. Yeah, I thought that was great. Yeah. And before we end this segment, though, and take a 5-minute break, and I see that I took us over a little bit here, I would like to hear from William, though. You know, I think it was just wonderful that the city took on this project and invested in it. And I'd love to hear a little bit more about the why you all felt that was important, and I think that our attendees would as well.
Yeah, sure. So real quick, I know we're a little short on time, as you mentioned, Cheryl. We saw it as a great opportunity to do something with essentially a commercial landscape. We have a fair number of demonstration gardens, a lot of single-family homes that have already transformed their landscapes and are great examples, but not a whole lot of commercial sites. So we thought, hey, it was during the last drought, now we're in another one. Let's lead by example. Let's try to transform this commercial landscape and give both ideas to both residential and commercial properties as to what they can do. So that was really kind of the genesis behind us reaching out to, and then ultimately hiring Calendar and Associates. And you know, we're so excited about the garden itself. And we had, because of COVID, it was a little delayed, but we had our first event in July, and it was just wonderful to have it there.
Yes, that's the one that we participated in.
Yes,
Is that right?
yes.
Yeah, great.
Did you have something, Dave?
Yeah, I know we're short on time. There's a couple of things that I wanted to add as far as things that can be considered in design of landscapes. And that's designing out, it's not just about the selection and management of the plants. It's also making sure you don't have features that provide harborage for pests that may not even just be landscape pests, but be that invade homes. And the biggest problem, for instance, the biggest problem that associated with insecticides in stormwater is Argentine ants. And so selecting plants that don't support the support the aphids that support the ants, and then also the use of mulch, which is great as far as water conservation and weed control. It also provides great harborage for Argentine ants. So managing the moisture, managing how close that is to the home. And then there's plenty of other like emerging problems like Turkestan cockroaches that live outside and they live in water boxes and things like that. So figuring out how to reduce the amount of harborage for them and for things like rats, and designing those harborages out of landscapes is a really important aspect of the integrated pest management that isn't necessarily directly about landscape pests.
Great addition. Thank you. Souley.
One thing I wanted to add is, because we didn't show it in the video, but it's fun, is if everybody's been asking about Carapia, what does Carapia look like? It is a turf substitute. So this project in the back of the building has a really cool stand of Carapia if you want to know what it looks like. It's growing nice out there.
I'd say not only is it cool, but it's irrigated a kind of a unique way with subsurface drip.
Yeah, we didn't have time to put it in that video, but this is a demonstration garden. So when you visit during the weekday hours, right, William?
Weekday, we do have a virtual tour. I can put it in the chat.
Oh, great.
We have a link to that.
Perfect.
Let me do that.
Yeah, that'd be great. So people who are not in the region can take a look. Oh, this is fantastic.
Great.
All right. Well, we could talk all day, but we should take a bio break. Yes, Cheryl?
Yes, let's do that until 5:05. How's that?
All right. We'll be right back, everybody.
All right. See you soon. Thank you.
That lady. All right. Okay, everyone, welcome back. It is time to take a visit to the Elk Grove Rain Garden Plaza. So we're back in Elk Grove, that's my hometown, to see an award-winning 1-acre public park that is teaching about water hydrology through direct hands-on experience. Favorite part. We're excited to have with us landscape architect Paul Mutin, who is Chief of Planning, Design, and Construction of the Casumnas Community Services District, and Dr. Lauren Oakey of UC Davis Environmental Horticulture. And cue it up, Cheryl.
All right, then. And I will open up the chat for just a moment. So if anybody's just come in, you can see what those permeable paver resources were. Okay. And we will be later on putting some resources into the other resources into the chat. So here you go.
I am a landscape architect by profession, and myself and my team were the designers for the Elk Grove Rain Garden Plaza. We were very interested in the principles of green infrastructure and the idea of rain garden and stormwater capture. So we suggested to the city that we include a rain garden in the project. At the same time, it was fortuitous, I guess, or serendipity, that the engineering division was sitting in on our conversations, and they said, how about you create a garden that maybe is a teaching location, a place that we can bring developers and residents to learn about stormwater retention. The main feature of the garden is this rain garden, which collects all of the water on the site. We wanted to incorporate not only the principles of stormwater retention, but also of drought-tolerant gardening and low-impact development. The water drains through the piping system into the central rain garden that is filled with plants, and nearly all native plants, in fact. You know, one of the goals was to create a landscape that is good for habitat. We don't need to be putting in impervious pavement in our driveways or roadways or definitely in our gardens. So this is what we refer to as our shroom. You know, it's designed to look kind of like a mushroom, but it's really a interactive sculpture designed to teach children about permeability of different surfaces. The water comes over the shroom, if you like, lands on our non-permeable paving, and it shows that the water then is wasted. You know, this is really the standard approach with the way that we treat water in our urban environment. Eventually, the water, of course, is going down the drain, and then that's leading directly to the rivers and the streams, and then it's taking all of those pollutants with it at the same time, and of course it's very harmful for our environment. Of course, the story here at the rain garden is that, oh no, we're not going to do that because we want to make sure that we use it to irrigate our rain garden. And here is pervious concrete, that water is actually being absorbed by the concrete, infiltrating into the subgrade or the earth below, and it's not going into the stormwater system. It's being retained on site. We have a number of different species that are planted in here. We have our mimulus in here. We have various Caraxes species that all can take water inundation and then also survive through the summer drought conditions that are prevalent in California. Firstly, we're keeping a lot of the water on site, obviously in the rain garden, but if in a major flood inundation, we have to have a way of releasing water from the site. So when the water rises to this level, it goes into this dry well, and it actually connects with our aquifer. We also can replenish our aquifer. One of the features of this boardwalk is that we wanted to create a place for folks to actually experience what it's like to be in a wetland, trying to mimic nature. We wanted to show folks not only what they can do in their garden, but how they can treat the runoff from their houses, from the roof. And so a rain barrel is a really good way of capturing water that can be reused later in the landscape. But we wanted to make the plaza an integral part of the whole stormwater retention theme with the park. This is an entirely pervious system of paving. Whenever there is a rain event, the water lands on this pavement, percolates through into a substrate of drain rock that is connected into perforated drains that drain into the rain garden, or they actually go into the subsoil below.
So in 2005, we started a research project in Sacramento County and in Orange County where we looked at 4 neighborhoods. We wanted to characterize the runoff coming off of those neighborhoods. What we found was that in both counties that there was a huge amount of non-storm runoff, so runoff generated as a result of irrigation. There's also a lot of stuff in it, pesticides, human pathogens and pathogen surrogates, indicators, and a lot of drinking water quality pollutants. One of the graduate students, she asked the question, if all the homes in Sacramento County look like the homes in our study areas, how much runoff would be generated from Sacramento County? She found that there was 4.7 times more runoff generated from non-storm sources. So all of that was potable water. Another research group, and what they found was that just by diverting rain runoff off the roof into the garden, they reduced runoff by 28%. But the huge number was that if they diverted water off the driveway into the garden, they reduced runoff by 65%. So management, that's really the key. You need to manage the irrigation so that you apply only the amount of water that plants need, not more, not less, and manage the irrigation so that you do not generate runoff. We need to pay attention to soil infiltration, the water infiltration into the soil, and we can improve those things by adding organic matter, either by composting. Compost and mulches are magic, in my opinion. That organic matter that's added to the soil supports microbiota in the soil, makes the soil healthier in a lot of different ways. Mulches are important because they act like a blanket over the soil. They keep the soil surface cool. When the soil's moist, they help soil retain moisture by reducing evaporation from the soil surface. The mulches, organic mulches break down again and kind of act as compost, and they support soil health. Encourage that water to penetrate and infiltrate the soil where it can be treated and recharge the groundwater source.
I'm not gonna lie. I'm really, I love the Elk Grove Rain Garden Plaza.
Yes.
It's my favorite park ever.
And thank you for sharing it with us. I've been going there for years now, thanks to you, Sule.
Thanks, Paul.
And Paul. So we've got questions. So first of all, that spiral is really neat. I love it when the video starts at the beginning and the drone is taking a great image of that whole area. How long, Paul, does the stormwater typically take? I know all storms are different, but how long does the stormwater typically take to soak into that permeable pavement?
Well, yeah, that's a good question. I mean, it really only takes a couple of, an hour or so. Once if you go out there in a rainstorm, if it's been raining a good solid hour or two, the water is coming out through the fish heads that are located in the rain garden. So it doesn't take very long for that water to percolate through. Mm-hmm. The hope is that some of that water is going into the natural grade as well. But, generally when you kind of create a system of permeable paving, that water does move fairly quickly, underneath too, if you have a slope on it. So some is absorbed and then some is going through a piping system as well.
What type of soil is there? Do you recall?
It's pretty much a clay soil that is existing there. We did, when we created the rain garden, I think, I would describe this, it's been in now for a good 10 years. So I think there's a lot of lessons that we learned. We were pretty new at building the rain garden, and the process was pretty organic with getting a lot of input and doing our own research. But, we basically brought in a sandy loam soil for the entire rain garden, thinking, oh, that's the best, that would be the best, to promote the plant growth and to be able to take on the inundation. I think in looking back, that it would be better to actually use or more appropriate to use like the native soil, add some amendments and break it up. But at the same time, it's okay if it becomes clay, right? That is sort of the natural condition in California anyway, and then treat it more like a wetland, because in reality, that the wetland or the rain garden area rarely fills up beyond about 6 inches in total, because when you have that large area and you have that plant material in there, there's a lot of absorption that takes place. So that was a surprising thing. We thought, oh, we want to do that to make sure that the water gets to the roots of the plants, and that we, don't have it overflow, because if it's clay, it's going to build up. But the reality is, with the amount of water that we receive in California, we very rarely get to that point.
Interesting. Yeah, thank you. And I see Lauren Oakey has joined us. Thank you, Lauren. I have one other question, Paul, at the moment that came into the chat asking about the carex species. What do you think is the best carex species to use for that rain garden, or for a rain garden?
I know we had Berkeley sedge in there, which is a carex, right? And we also had gray rush, I think it was. Is it Carmen's gray rush? They were the only ones I think that we had in there. We did have some deer grass, the monkey flower, the seat monkey flower, made it through maybe 1 or 2 years, and then it didn't make it after that. A plant that did quite well in there was the ribes, the native ribes, the golden currant. That has managed to, I think that is still there today. It's a publicly maintained park, and it's sort of, I think the city had hired a professional, landscape maintenance team, and we had written a pretty solid manual, for them to follow, like no pesticides, mulch, and consist, and if you're going to prune the plants, prune them according to, their botanical needs, don't, because the tendency for all commercial landscape maintenance is to prune at 2 or 3 times a year, and you just prune everything exactly the same. So that has been a battle out there, even though that was in the specifications. Someone has to be enforcing that. So
that was one of our questions.
Oh yeah, yes. It's and if I go out there today, that's sort of the hardest part about it, is to appreciate that it's a public space, and it will be landscaped with public dollars, public. They have to bid everything out to, lowest bid. And I think that's the hardest thing to watch, is like, oh, no one's mulched for 3 or 4 years from what I can see. If a plant, plants will need replacing over a 10-year period. And, really, we had provided in the maintenance schedule, that they would need to replace those plants over time, and that hasn't happened. So I think that's sort of our biggest lesson learned, is how it's great to be able to create these wide variety of plants and great spaces, but to be able to maintain them is a little bit difficult, and it just needs somebody being careful and paying attention.
Yeah, definitely. And there are some, education and training programs out there. There is the G3 Greener Gardens Group, or Green Gardens Group. There's the Rescape California, the Qualified Water Efficient Landscaper programs. CLCA has a water management program, Irrigation Association, and so forth. So it's really, there's programs out there, but it's still very, very hard to find qualified people to take care of these wonderful gardens that are being designed and installed. And Lauren says that and maybe Lauren, you just want to speak to that, because the other thing that I'd like you to answer or speak to that about the irrigation, the carex, and what's going on at Davis. And I'd also like, if you can see this book right here, I'm going to put the link into the chat. And this was a research project called Runoff Water and Garden Design that that Lauren can speak to us about. And I will give you the link to that in the chat here. So Lauren, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, so that document that you showed was a product of research project that I mentioned. We had a couple of professors from landscape architecture on the project, from UC Davis on the project. And they produced that book that kind of summarized what we found in our research, that how much water was running off urban landscapes, what was in it, things you can do to mitigate that runoff and reduce the water use on landscapes. And that was done quite a while ago. Like I said, I think we started that research in 2005. And we actually finished it in about, I think it was 2009 or something like that. And then that document was produced right after. And so what we found was that, like I said in the video, that what made me want to start researching that topic was I started my job in 2002 and I wanted to study urban runoff, and I couldn't find any information about the water that was coming off of neighborhoods, and that's where I felt most of that water was coming from. Homeowners are, I'll just say it, homeowners are terrible irrigation managers. It's a really difficult thing to do for anybody, and it's really difficult for homeowners to do because they're not irrigation managers, they're not soil scientists, they're not horticulturists. They own a yard and they want to take care of it. So they just the old saying was that if a little's good, more's better, and that was typically the response when plants didn't look well. You put more water on. Now we know, we're smarter now, that that's not necessarily the case. We have to use water wisely. We have to make sure we choose the proper plants. Soil health is really important. There's all these other things that are involved with managing water. And that's where I want to get back to is that thing I said in the video is that it starts with the proper design, plant selection, soil health, and all that, but we still have to manage irrigation properly. You can have the most perfect landscape, but if you leave the valve on, you're going to waste water. So you really have to pay attention to how the water is applied. You have to pay attention to the weather to tell you when to increase irrigation and decrease it, during, like now in the fall when it's starting to cool off. You just have to be aware. And there are a lot of resources available to help you with that. The use of master gardeners are in most counties in California. That's one of the things that they key on is water management. And I have to say that I teach a lot of the classes for master gardeners in water management. So.
Hey, Lauren, I wanted to follow up on the Carrick Spisa. You guys are doing trials on that, or?
We did that a long time ago. It was when we first started this project, the UC Landscape Plant Irrigation Trials at Davis. We started that. I think the first results we published were in 2006, and the first plants that we tested were the Arboretum All-Stars, and Carrick Spisa was on that list. And what we found was, when we were doing those tests originally, what we found was the plants at the 20% of reference ET irrigation rate were only receiving irrigation between mid-April to the end of October. At 20%, we only gave them 2 irrigations in that whole period. And Carrick Spisa looked great. It looked as good as all the other treatments. You couldn't tell the difference between any of the treatments.
Thank you. I love that. I was not aware.
So if you go to the UC Landscape Plant Irrigation Trials website,
okay,
I think the results are there.
Great. Sule, would you like to take us into the next segment here, our next videos?
All right. Last, but really definitely not least, we're going to see a landscape where everything ends up, literally everything ends up before it hits the Delta and the ocean eventually. Our expert guide is biologist Brian Young, Natural Resources Supervisor for the Bufferlands, Sacramento Regional County Sanitation District, And before we tour the buffer lands, first we're going to see what else happens on that site. And first, Cheryl's going to queue up the programs, and you can also watch the chat for links to the different programs if you want to know more while you're watching, or you want to do a little research before you ask Brian a question. So here comes Regional SAN programs.
Hi, my name is Brian Young. I'm the Natural Resource Supervisor for the Sacramento Regional County Sanitation District, or Regional SAN as we're better known. Regional SAN owns and operates the Sacramento Regional Wastewater Treatment Plant, which is right back over here over my shoulder. And I know today we're going to talk a lot more about the Regional SAN stewardship and conservation efforts out here outside of the wastewater treatment plant, but I don't want to lose sight at how critically important Regional SAN's primary mission of collecting and treating wastewater is to the environment. And what we do here is we clean it up to a level that we can return it to the environment. So the water that doesn't get treated and sent out to the river, we're actually treating it to even a higher level. And that's water that we're making available to the community for landscaping parks and schools and street medians. And in fact, we are nearing the end of a major upgrade to the wastewater treatment plant, the Echo Water program. And by the time we're completed, which should be in the next year or so, all the water that we produce, that whole 125 million gallons a day, that's going to be to that Title 22 standard that would make it available for use in landscape situations. In light of the fact that we're creating so much high quality recycled water, we're embarking on another program. We got a great state grant fund to build a pumping plant and a distribution system that would allow us to take this recycled water, a good portion of what we treat, and send it to the South County where it can be used for ag production. It's about 16,000 acre area where most of the crops are irrigated with groundwater. And that, of course, over the years has resulted in a large drop in the groundwater table. And what our modeling has showed is that if we can get the farmers to reduce the amount of groundwater that they're using, over the next 10, 20 years, we'll see that groundwater recover. So when we reach the end of the Echo Water project, all the water that we treat is going to be to such a level, we call it the Title 22 level, that we'll be able to use it for landscaping purposes. We'll also be able to use it for agriculture irrigation. And so we've started another project. We call it the Harvest Water Project. In fact, if you're familiar with the Cosumnes River, you probably know that it runs dry as it comes from the mountains down to the valley. It runs dry usually, by June every year. And but the modeling is showing that once we raise up that groundwater, we'll see continuous flows all the way from the mountain to the valley. It's also going to be great for our riparian systems that need to be rooted down into that groundwater. So we'll be able to see thousands of acres of riparian areas recover as well. So recycling water, that's probably the most obvious part of the whole resource recovery that we do. But we're also doing stuff with the solids. So, at the treatment plant, we're separating the solids and the liquids and treating the liquids before they go out to the river. But we also have the solids, and we take a portion of the solid material after it's been sitting and digesting in these ponds for 5 years. It gets harvested, and we send about 30% of the biosolids that we harvest to a third-party recycling company that's turning that material into a pelletized fertilizer. I have an example of it right here, if you can see. It's actually one of my favorite giveaways ever. It's when the recycling company opened up, they were giving out these things. That's perfect. Methane is probably another one you may be thinking of, or sewer gas. It's obviously another component of the whole wastewater process. And we're taking that and we send it to a cogeneration plant, which is also just back over my shoulder. And they're using that in conjunction with natural gas and using it to make electricity. It's a great backup power source for the wastewater treatment plant. And it's just another example of how we recover resources out of the whole waste stream. The amount of methane gas that we recover every year is enough to power 7,500 homes. And that's a pretty good sized community.
Wonderful. Now Cheryl's going to cue us up our buffer lands video with Brian, and then we'll have Q&A comments from Brian and all of our experts. Can't wait for y'all to see this. This is very fun. Let's go.
Yeah, and give me just a moment here.
Yeah, no worries.
All right.
Hi, my name is Brian Young. I'm the Natural Resource Supervisor for the Sacramento Regional County Sanitation District, or Regional SAN as we're better known. Regional SAN owns and operates the Sacramento Regional Wastewater Treatment Plant. We have 1.6 million people that either flush or send their wastewater down this direction, and what we do here is we clean it up to a level that we can return it to the environment. Mostly that happens at the Sacramento River, where we discharge our treated effluent to the tune of about 125 million gallons a day. That's enough to fill up 190 Olympic-sized swimming pools every day. So a lot of water, and of course that's benefiting the wildlife habitat of the fragile delta ecosystem, but also it's important for the downstream users, the farmers, the downstream water purveyors, everyone that recreates on the Sacramento and Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta. So it's an important function. You know, I don't think environmental protection is necessarily the first word association you get with sewage treatment plant, but maybe it should be. So we're standing out here on the buffer lands, which is the land that surrounds the wastewater treatment plant. So our approach to management of the buffer lands has not just been simply put a fence around the whole thing, but rather we've taken an active approach to our habitat restoration and habitat management. We've restored hundreds of acres of wetlands, of forest, our oak woodlands, our riparian forest. We've planted over 45,000 trees in the last 30 years. And also our grasslands, recreating that native grassland ecosystem in several areas of the bufferlands. I've been out here for nearly 30 years, and the wildlife response has just been phenomenal. Our bird list is up to 245 different species. We've seen as many as 120 species in a single day out here, so it's pretty incredible. So everyone knows our state flower, but not everybody knows that Stipa pulchra, or purple needlegrass, is our state grass. This plant right here has this vast root system, and it probably goes down 12, 15 feet. And as it puts down those roots, it's creating these channels. So those roots are constantly living, constantly dying. Every year it's shedding off all these dead roots. And that's leaving these channels in the soil so that when the rain comes, the soil is porous and it can take that water right down and recharge your groundwater. But what it's also doing, again with those roots, it's putting that carbon down in its roots. And as it sheds those roots every year, it's putting that carbon in the soil. So a great way that we're building soil and sequestering carbon. So Sacramento River is just about a mile behind me. So that's where our discharge is. So we need to be fairly close to the river. It's low in elevation. We're standing almost near sea level right here. So very low in the watershed. The bufferlands is part of the Morrison Creek Streams Group, which is about 192 square mile area. And all those kind of converge into this area. Low elevation, fairly flat topography. So that kind of puts us in the bottom of the watershed, at least the part of the watershed before the water then travels on further downstream into the Sacramento River and down through the Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta. So what happens down here in the bufferlands, again, where we're low in elevation, flat in topography, is that water that's coming screaming down Laguna Creek, Morrison Creek, it comes down to this area of the bufferlands. At the same time, you have your water levels rising in the Sacramento and the Cosumnes and the McCollum. And so you have water backing up in the system, water coming down the system, and then it all kind of sits here at the bufferlands. It's like kind of a big bathtub effect. So when you slow the flow like that as it's coming down, it has some important water quality benefits. One is just filtration or sedimentation, deposition. Things like settle out as that water flows down, which again, I can say it's not always pretty. Probably at the coarsest level, what you're dealing with is litter or debris. You have this accumulation of trash, whether it's, you know, fast food wrappers or discarded toys. It all accumulates, and then you get these storm events that flush it all down into this part of the system. And then as that water slows down here, it all kind of filters out. The pollutants, so the organic and inorganic materials that come down the streams, you know, maybe that's the fertilizer and pesticide runoff, maybe it's the oil and grease off the street. But that also settles out here in the wetlands, and the wetlands does a fair job at breaking down harmful substances into something that's less harmful to the environment. They're great at using up nutrients. The plants in our wetland systems will use up that nitrogen and phosphorus that's coming down into the system. You have all that material being broken down. That decomposition reaction, well, it does a few things. One, oxygen depletion. So dissolved oxygen, that reaction uses that oxygen. So we see a reduction in our available oxygen in the water, which is tough on our fish populations and other aquatic organisms. So it can be challenging. So again, our wetlands down here in the bufferlands, they're doing their part as far as cleaning up that water before it goes further down the watershed into the Sacramento, on all the way down to the Pacific Ocean. But it would certainly be helped by some forethought going into our landscape designs up in the watershed. If we could slow that runoff coming off of our landscapes and think about trying to prevent our fertilizers or our pesticides from making it into the watershed. That's a little less work that our bufferlands wetlands are going to need to do before that water gets out to the Sacramento. We're in a forest that we've started the process of restoring probably more than 10 years ago. Clustered field sedge or Carex praegracilis. I think a lot of folks in landscaping might be familiar with this one in that it's becoming a real popular lawn alternative. Folks that are kind of tearing out the traditional lawn and going with a native meadow type situation. This is that species. This is what it does out in the wild. When we do a project like this forest or this grassland, we are trying to walk away from it as soon as we can. The goal is to select species that are adapted to the climate, that are adapted to the soil, so that we don't have to do a lot of work in the long run. This is a valley oak tree. It's obviously been shedding leaves all fall and winter, and that's important. I mean, we don't rake this up and get rid of this stuff. This is a perfect way to build healthy soils. You can see that this leaf litter, when you get down here to the soil below, I mean, this forest has been growing for a good 10 years, and so you get this nice, loose, friable soil right below that leaf litter. This material is going to become that organic material. A couple things that I've learned out here is patience and perseverance. I like that we're building something. We build this wildlife habitat, or restore this wildlife habitat. Having been out here for 30 years, I've been able to see these things grow up, and it's really rewarding to see the canopy closure, the natural recruitment, the wildlife that responds to these different restoration projects.
Wow, I always see something different every showing of these videos. That's amazing. Let's see, we got Brian up here.
Yeah, and I have to say, Brian, I thank you for your commitment, Regional Sands commitment. You inspire me and helps me to feel there's hope. There's hope.
I myself am scandalized that you guys are not raking your leaves. Just kidding. All right. Yeah. All right. So there you have it. Tons of questions in my mind, but anything we missed or any comments from you first, Brian, and then from our other experts?
No, Soleil, I think really just what I wanted to say, is that I hope you got the picture that the bufferlands is basically a 2,000 acre bioswale or rain garden. And I know that's why Cheryl and Soleil and Martine, I think why they contacted me, or one of the reasons was because a lot of these things that all the speakers have been talking about today that we're talking about doing in the landscapes, they're just mimicking these functions that we're doing in the watershed, or that are occurring naturally in the watershed. And so yeah, I thought it was a great way to kind of wrap it up. And you can just see, I hope everyone saw all the parallels from our approach to habitat restoration, but also our approach to watershed management.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So let's see, and Marcia is going to help me scan for any questions that I might have missed. Who is using the recycled water? I know that's one of the programs, and I did put a lot of links into the chat to your various programs there at Regional SAN. So if you all just click on those links, your browser will open up and then you can save it or do whatever you would like with it from there. But what about the recycled water right now? Who's using that?
Yeah, so right now, I mentioned in the video, we're treating on average 125 million gallons of wastewater a day. Most of that's going out to the Sacramento River, but we do have a water reclamation facility on site right now. I guess in the grand scheme of things, it's a relatively small operation. We produce about 3 million gallons a day of purple pipe water, or recycled water, that water that meets Title 22 parameters that allow us to send it out to be used for landscaping. And we're sending it down into the adjacent community, like Laguna in Elk Grove. It's being used in parks and street medians. We're also sending some of it up to a cogeneration facility up by the old Campbell Soup area north of us, where it's being used as cooling water. But that's again, as I alluded to in the videos, right now, while we're just doing that 3 million gallons a day, we're just about to bring our tertiary facility online, which is going to basically make our entire facility a large recycled water plant. It's all that whole 125 million gallon a day average is going to become Title 22 compatible. And so now we have a lot more flexibility and a lot more availability of recycled water. And of course, the big project I mentioned was our harvest water project, where we'll be, this will take us a few years to build, but we got a huge grant from the state, over $300 million to build this facility to send that water down to the South County, where it can be used for agricultural irrigation. So yeah, we're looking forward to getting that project started.
That's great. And I saw that that Paul said relative to the Elk Grove Rain Garden and the Cosumnes Community Services District, that they use a lot of that recycled water. So that's great. Yeah, Paul, did you want to say anything more about that?
Yeah, sure. As Brian, I mean, great work, Brian. I loved your presentation and found it just so inspiring. It's like the big picture, everything comes together, and you see what we're all trying to get to, and the effects of everything that we do. But yeah, we at the Cosumnes CSD, we manage all the park and trail systems in Elk Grove, and the Laguna area. That is a pretty big area, and that is getting recycled water right now. But then the East Franklin area, Laguna Ridge are all purple pipe systems, and I think we're talking about probably 50 or 60,000 residents living in those areas that are going to be getting recycled water. So it really is the future. Once we get all of those transfer systems and pump systems up and running, so the whole area is getting recycled water. So Thanks.
That's a
Thanks, that
great point. Great point, Paul. I'm glad you brought that up. And as we start this distribution system for the Harvest Water Program, that's pretty much the first stop on the way down to the South County as we go down Franklin Boulevard, is to that distribution facility that's going to be created, to provide that recycled water to the residents of that East Franklin area.
This is fascinating tie-in. Yeah.
The benefit is, in a drought situation, the parks and recreation are somewhat like, sports fields, for instance, are exempted, say, from MAWA requirements. And sometimes when, there are state regulations come in about water use, and you go from stage 2 to stage 3 drought, there's sort of this thing that, we need to keep the fields up for, our soccer teams and our youth sports and everything. And so that really, that's a major, user of water during summer. And to have this recycled water resource, I mean, the benefits, it's not only about seeing, plants and trees survive through a drought, it's also this resource of, recreation facilities that people can enjoy, which in the future, it's going to be really difficult to sustain those outdoor recreational activities if we don't, use recycled water, really. So great.
Yeah. I see Dave Tamayo, you have your hand raised. Would you like to add to this conversation?
Yeah, great video, Brian, and
I know, right?
That was really well done. So Soleil started out talking about how water connects, a lot of different aspects of our lives. And a couple things I wanted to point out. One is, and Brian mentioned this, was that, I'm a SMUD director, and we're operating that cogen plant that we're using the water, the recycled water from their project. And that really helps us. That greatly reduces the amount of water we need to take out of the American River to cool down the power plant there. And so that's an important aspect of the recycled water, is not just preserving groundwater, but also reducing the amount of water that we get out of there. The other thing that he mentioned was, with respect to the wetlands, as far as the cleaner the water is going in, the less hard it has to work. That also applies to the sewer shed that Regional SAN has all over the county. And I've actually, in my former job, sort of partnered with SAN districts to help try and get pesticides used less in indoor situations where they get into the drains. It's not a stormwater problem at that point, but then it still has the potential of causing problems in the recycled water system and the water that's sent to the river, and also in the biosolids that Brian referred to. So even if things are in a separate pipe system, they all get back connected together. So there's very good reasons to try and avoid using pesticides, including things like antimicrobials. Many things that are being used indoors are not necessary, or they're being disposed of incorrectly down the sewer, and so and that affects our water too. So and the ability to use it safely.
Right. And Steve, I see that you have your hand raised as well. Thank you. Thank you,
Brian, I think one of the things that hit me as someone who did organic landscape maintenance for a long time was he talked about landscapers helping out the buffer lands and watersheds in general by keeping the fertilizers and the pesticides out of the landscapes. And what a lot of people don't realize is there's a big difference between synthetic fertilizers and organic fertilizers. We should need to be avoiding the synthetic fertilizers, one, because they're water soluble. You apply those to the landscape, especially if you're not using the designs that we're recommending here. And if there's any kind of runoff, those synthetic fertilizers are going off into the runoff. But even if they're not running off, because they're water soluble, every time you're irrigating, every time it rains, they're getting leached down into the groundwater. And sometimes it's little aquifers that drain into our rivers. And so we really want to reduce using these synthetic fertilizers. In actuality, because you got so much running off and so much leaching, the plants actually only use about 2% of that synthetic fertilizer. That synthetic fertilizer is also high in salt, which sucks the moisture out of all that soil biology. So it's killing that soil biology. So we need to switch to organic fertilizers. They are water insoluble for the most part, so they don't run off, they don't leach, so there's no water contamination. They're low in salt, so they're not harming the soil biology. In actuality, they're food for soil biology. And so we can, just by changing what kinds of fertilizers we use, we can make a big impact as to how much of this gunk ends up in our waterways.
So that's really great. And before we segue to one other thing, I had a comment come in, Brian, about Amelia commented on how exciting it is to learn about regional sands methane and how many homes it's powering. That's really exciting. It's like this multifaceted approach that you all are taking. But I didn't want to get too far off, though, of, you know, the pesticides and contaminants in the water. It moves us to one of the things that you spoke about, Brian, with all the life, all the birds, how the number of populations have increased. It's just incredible. So, you know, can you speak to that? And maybe do you have a favorite one or two or three or four?
Oh, that's like asking me for my favorite child of the two girls I have. I'm not going to answer that one. But I will tell you that the diversity that we see in wildlife on the bufferlands is amazing. And part of it's because of the the efforts that we've taken to restore and enhance the habitat. Through we planted over 45,000 trees on the property. We've restored or created hundreds of acres of wetlands, restored our grassland systems. But it's also just a big factor as to how unique the property is. It's just 2,000 acres, but it's a unique 2,000 acres in that it's very low in the watershed. It's a low elevation, so we're pretty deep in the floodplain, especially on the west side. That west side is below sea level in some areas, but then as you go from west to east, you go up towards Franklin Boulevard, and it's like you're actually only going up about 24 feet in elevation, which may not seem like a lot, but it really drives some diversity in our habitat. So west side is the emergent marsh, our managed seasonal wetlands, our really dense riparian forest. But then you move over to the east side and you're into vernal pool grasslands and oak savanna. And so I think it's that kind of diversity that we have out there is, why we have, for such a small acreage, why we have such a diverse avifauna and fauna in general.
Just really wonderful. And I think if people go to the website, and as I said, we've got various links in here, you can see all about the tours and the events that you hold out there, and the latest monarch news from your office gardens. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, no, that's a good one. I'll mention that. Well, I'll mention two things. One, the bufferlands isn't open to the public. Some of these other places like the Rain Garden, I'm also a fan of and visit on a regular basis anytime I have visitors in town. But at the bufferlands, for plant security and public safety, it's kind of by invite only or by controlled access. So, but we do like to have the public come out. So we offer a public tour about every month, and you can find that on our website, bufferlands.com. We have an open trail event coming up on October 22nd. We're going to open up probably 6 or 7 miles of trails, and you can come by any time of the day between 7 and 5 and just explore parts of the bufferlands on your own. But the monarch situation, that was a real interesting find. I think we didn't talk a lot about pollinator habitat in our landscapes, but of course it's an important component. And in our landscape just around our office, we incorporated some milkweed. Sorry, David, I know that attracts some aphids and probably some ants, but it also attracted some monarchs to lay some eggs on our milkweed. And so we're always with the plight of the monarch and the major decline that we've been seeing in the overwintering populations over the last several years, to go out into our landscape and find 30 of these monarch caterpillars that are now all into the chrysalis stage. So it's pretty exciting, and I think exciting for a lot of folks in the landscape business to show this practice what you preach kind of thing. And when we can show it really works, it's a good teaching moment.
Absolutely. Well, as we wrap up, is there anything else before I turn it back over to Soleil? I'm sorry, Dave, were you going to say something?
I said it's a great trade-off. I'll support monarchs and accept a few extra ants.
And Dave, I got to say congratulations on your retirement, but sure sad to see you outside of the county system. You've been such a great resource for us for so many years.
You as well. Thank you.
Wonderful. Well, Soleil, shall I turn it back over to you?
All right. I have 1,000 more questions in my mind. I don't know about you guys, but 2 hours is a lot. So we're going to bring it to a close. So I see that we've been working to bring you the runoff water and garden design brochure. Looks like that has been entered in the chat. We'll figure it out if that doesn't work. And also Cheryl has entered in the chat another really important booklet that is produced by APLD-CA.org. It's the Watershed Approach Handbook. It's a great one for your clients if you're a designer. There will be a link to watch today's event that will be sent to you. It's going to be available for roughly 2 weeks. And I think we might be doing the chat as well, Cheryl, to grab if we can.
Sometimes the chat shows up on the side of the recording and sometimes it doesn't.
Sometimes not.
I'm not sure.
We'll see if Zoom allows, if the great Zoom God. But you will very soon be able to find these videos at APLD-CA.org on the advocacy page, and anybody can go there to look at them. And I can't let you go yet because we do want you to check out APLD California on Eventbrite for another literally amazing program that is happening right now. It started in September and it's going through November. It's called Slow the Burn Symposium. It's a virtual, creating beautiful native landscapes in the face of water scarcity and fire, learning from the past and designing for future challenges. It is geared towards landscape professionals. Anybody can join. I highly recommend it if you live in fire country, if you know anybody who does, if you design there, if you're a Californian or anybody who lives in the West. Offering design solutions, working knowledge to help develop and maintain resilient landscapes with native plants that promote biodiversity. It is literally blowing my brain into bits so it can come back together again with new amazing information, cutting edge conversations with experts every single week. They come at us with new things. So that's amazing. It is ongoing. The sessions are recorded and the materials are available with reduced pricing for APLD members. Thank you very much to our sponsors, but anybody can sign up and you can get those recordings. It's amazing. Are you not a member? What? You're not a member? Support these programs and become a member of APLD. We welcome any kind of folks. Screenshot with panelists. I'm not sure. I'll let Cheryl do that. We welcome educators, architects, designers, retired folks, students. And if you don't fall into any of those, you're just a design interested person, you could come in under allied for other related industries and folks. Go to APLD-CA.org. I'm going to say that to wrap.
And one other quick thing, if our experts will please turn on your cameras, I will take that screenshot. Okay. And then you just, we want to close with a wonderful thank you.
Thank you to
Come on,
everyone
Brian, you can
here
do it.
today.
Dave, Gary.
Thanks to
Come
our
on.
panelists, especially our sponsors of Show the Flow, and finally to you. You showed up. Thank you for considering watersheds.
And let's see, everybody's saying love the videos. Thank you so much for the fabulous work. Excellent.